Welcome to the Top Pod Breakdown, the Joe Rogan Experience. Feel free to like and subscribe for all our content. Thank you so much for being here.
Right. Welcome to another deep dive. We got a pretty interesting one today. Joe Rogan Experience, episode number 2249, Yannis Pappas, Chris Distefano.
Yeah, this one's a wild ride.
Oh, yeah. Rogan and a couple of comedians were talking history, conspiracy theories, all kinds of stuff. What did you find interesting about this one?
Well, right off the bat, you've got this scene with Chris Distefano trying a cigar for the first time. He's like 40 years old and has never smoked a
I
cigar.
remember that, yeah.
It's pretty funny.
And it's hilarious. But it also kind of makes you think about, like, masculinity and, expectations.
Right. It's like what we expect guys to be into. Distefano even jokes about not being good at guy stuff.
Exactly. Is it just a joke or is there something more to it?
Definitely something to think about. But then from cigars, they somehow jump to talking about historical hygiene.
I love when they go off on these tangents. Like Rogan starts describing how people used to bathe like once a week.
Yeah, no daily showers back then.
Makes you appreciate modern plumbing, that's for sure. It does. Though he did point out that Muslims in antiquity, they actually had pretty good hygiene practices.
Right. Which just goes to show that it's not like everyone was living in filth all the time. Different cultures, different standards. But hold on, because then they get into generational trauma, which is a pretty heavy topic.
Yeah, they were talking about how things like psychopathy or racism could be passed down through generations, even like specific memories.
And Rogan uses the example of dogs and how they have these innate behaviors.
Like it's not all just nurture, right? There's a nature component too.
It makes you think about how much of who we are is predetermined.
Right, nature versus nurture. But just when you think you've got a handle on that, we're suddenly in prison planet territory.
Yeah, Distefano drops this theory that Earth is basically a prison run by aliens who feed off our negative energy.
I remember that, keeping us trapped in this cycle of suffering.
And then they connect it to meditation, like how meditation can help us break free.
So is it a conspiracy theory or is there something deeper there?
Who knows, but it's definitely thought-provoking. And speaking of thought-provoking, from aliens they go to talking about Andrew Dice Clay.
Quite a jump.
Yeah, but they paint this interesting picture of him, like Dice Clay, the comedian known for his outrageous offensive humor, turns out to be a devoted family man.
Especially when it comes to his kids.
It makes you realize that there's often more to people than just their public persona.
And they tie it into this whole idea of how communication and parenting have changed, especially in the digital age.
Which leads us perfectly into the next topic, the Shan tribe of Papua New Guinea.
This one is, well, Rogan reads this passage describing their male initiation ritual.
Yeah.
And let's just say it's pretty intense.
It definitely makes you question cultural relativity. Like, can we judge another culture's practices based on our own values?
Tough question.
And they tie this back to masculinity, too, comparing the Shan tribe's beliefs to, figures like Alexander the Great.
Showing how what's considered manly has changed so much throughout history.
Absolutely. But then, from ancient rituals, they jump to this very modern phenomenon, cake shaming.
Oh, yeah, I remember this.
Yeah.
Like people getting criticized online for enjoying a piece of cake.
Yeah, it seems ridiculous, but Rogan connects it to this larger trend of negativity online.
He even compares it to the decline of civilizations like ancient Rome.
And he suggests that we've created this talking shit economy where negativity thrives.
And it's contributing to, like, societal instability.
It's a pretty grim outlook, but you can't deny that there's some truth to it.
Definitely something to think about.
Mm-hmm.
So then from cake shaming, they switch gears completely to waste management.
Out of nowhere. But specifically, they're talking about Singapore's system, which is considered one of the best in the world.
And they use it to critique corporations for not taking enough responsibility for their environmental impact.
Like, what happens to their products at the end of their life cycle?
It's a call for greater corporate accountability and a move towards a more sustainable circular economy.
For sure. And speaking of accountability, the conversation then shifts to the FTX scandal and the whole world of cryptocurrency.
Right. Rogan and his guests, they're clearly trying to wrap their heads around this new and, often confusing market.
They discuss the ethics of celebrities promoting crypto, especially given the legal trouble that some of them, like Tom Brady, faced because of their involvement with FTX.
Yeah, and they express a lot of skepticism and confusion about crypto in general, highlighting the volatility and the risks involved.
They're not buying into the hype. which I think leads perfectly into the next topic, artificial intelligence.
AI, yeah. Remember, Distefano mentioned using ChatGPT for financial advice,
Yeah.
even though his accountant warned him against it.
Yeah, which is a perfect example of how we're already relying on AI for important decisions, even if we don't fully understand it.
And they get into this concept of artificial general intelligence, or AGI. Basically, AI that reaches human-level intelligence or even surpasses it.
And they discuss this mind-blowing idea that the first person to achieve immortality through consciousness uploading might already be alive today.
It's wild to think about. But they also acknowledge the potential dangers of AI becoming too powerful, especially since we don't really know how it works.
Right. It's a balancing act, embracing the potential benefits while trying to mitigate the risks.
And it kind of ties back to that earlier discussion about generational trauma and the idea that maybe our personalities are influenced by forces beyond our control.
Like, are we really in the driver's seat, or are we just along for the ride?
That's a great question. And speaking of things beyond our control, we can't forget about drones.
Oh, yeah, drones are everywhere.
Rogan and his guests, they discuss how they're being used for surveillance and military purposes.
And they point to China, how they're way ahead of the U.S. in drone technology and have fewer regulations.
And then things take a really interesting turn when they suggest that all these drones might actually be a distraction.
A distraction from what?
From actual UFO activity. Like, maybe they're flooding the skies with drones to cover up something even more advanced.
So we're going back down the rabbit hole of UFOs and aliens.
Buckle up, because things are about to get strange.
So are we really alone in the universe? Like, is that what we're getting at?
It's the big question, isn't it? I mean, it's easy to dismiss UFO sightings as hoaxes or weather balloons or whatever. But then you hear about the sheer number of reports from credible sources, and you start to wonder.
Especially now, with everyone having a camera in their pocket, you'd think if there were really something out there, we'd have way more evidence by now.
Right. And they did mention that. Like, with all these drones flying around, it might be harder to tell what's what.
Like, they could be using drones as a cover-up.
Exactly. Flood the skies with familiar objects so the truly strange stuff blends in.
Makes sense, I guess. But it also makes you think about how much of what we see, especially online, is even real anymore.
Right, with deep fakes and AI and all that.
Yeah.
It's hard to know what to believe.
Which is why they keep emphasizing the importance of critical thinking, right? We can't just blindly accept everything we see or hear.
Definitely not. And especially not when it comes to, like, the media.
Yeah.
They talk about how sensationalized reporting can really fuel fear and paranoia.
Even when dealing with legitimate mysteries.
Exactly. So how do you strike that balance, right? Acknowledge the unknown without letting fear take over.
It's tricky. And they touch on this idea of, like, what would happen if there was some major UFO event?
Like societal collapse.
Yeah. How would people react? Would our institutions hold up?
It's interesting to think about. It kind of highlights our anxieties about the unknown and how fragile our systems really are. And speaking of anxieties, we can't forget about alien abductions.
Oh, yeah.
Rogan brings up the Betty and Barney Hill case.
The one from the 50s.
Yeah. They claim to have been abducted, reported missing time, strange medical examinations.
And the memories only came back under hypnosis, right?
Yeah. Exactly.
Mm.
And it's like a blueprint for so many other abduction stories.
Mm.
It's fascinating how many of them have similar elements.
It's like the feeling of paralysis, the distorted sense of time.
Medical procedures. It's all pretty unsettling.
Mm-hmm.
And then it makes you wonder, like, what's the purpose of these abductions? What do they want?
Right. Rogan makes a comparison to how we study animals, like maybe they're doing the same to us.
Collecting genetic material, running long-term observations. Who knows?
It's a crazy thought, but it kind of makes you feel small, you know? Like we're just lab rats in some cosmic experiment.
Yeah, it's humbling. But it also brings up another question. Why wouldn't they just reveal themselves? If they're so advanced, why all the secrecy?
That's a good question. Maybe they're concerned about interfering with our development, or maybe they just don't care about interacting with us on a conscious level.
Who knows? It's a lot to wrap your head around. But then they shift gears again. And we're talking about psychedelics.
This is where Rogan really gets passionate.
He's a big advocate for the therapeutic use of psychedelics, especially for treating things like PTSD.
And they discuss how psychedelics can help people confront traumatic memories, process difficult emotions.
In a controlled environment, of course.
With proper guidance and integration. And they talk about the research that's being done, how psychedelics are showing promise for treating depression, anxiety, addiction.
It's like a whole new paradigm for mental health care.
It's pretty amazing, actually. It's like a reminder that we have the power to heal, to evolve.
And speaking of evolution, they bring up another topic that's shaping the future: artificial intelligence. So we've gone from Chris Distefano and cigars to, like, the potential rise of super intelligent machines.
It's a wild ride with Rogan, that's for sure. Never know where the conversation's going to go next.
Yeah, but this AI stuff is really interesting, especially after Distefano admitting he used ChatGPT for financial advice.
Right. Even with his accountant telling him not to.
Makes you think, like, how much should we trust AI with these important decisions?
Especially since we don't even fully understand how it works. And that's what Rogan and his guests keep coming back to. Like, we're barely scratching the surface of what AI can do.
And what the consequences might be.
Exactly. They talk about this concept of artificial general intelligence, AGI.
AI that's as smart as humans, or even smarter.
And they bring up this crazy idea that the first person to achieve immortality, like uploading their consciousness, they might already be alive.
It's mind-blowing, but also kind of terrifying.
Because they talk about the potential downsides too, right?
Job displacement, economic disruption, maybe even AI being used for, like, really bad things.
Like autonomous weapon systems or manipulating people's opinions.
Scary stuff. But then they also acknowledge the potential good that could come from AI.
Advancements in medicine, scientific discoveries, maybe even solutions to, like, climate change.
Right. So it's not just all doom and gloom.
It's more about being aware of the possibilities, both good and bad.
And making sure we're using it responsibly.
Exactly. And it kind of brings us back to a point they made earlier, which is like a lot of this comes down to choices.
Like with technology, with the environment, even with, like, encountering alien life.
We have to be aware of the choices we're making and what the consequences might be.
And that leads to that final question that Rogan asks, which I thought was brilliant.
What was that?
If an advanced alien civilization were watching us, what would they think of our obsession with social media?
Wow. Yeah. Like,
Yeah.
are we so busy documenting our lives that we're missing the actual experience?
Good question to ask ourselves, right? And
Yeah.
in a world that's changing so fast with all this technology, where are we headed? What kind of future are we creating?
Yeah. Makes you think.
It has been a wild, deep dive. From cigars and hygiene to aliens and AI.
It's amazing what you can learn just by listening to people talk.
And that's what we try to do here, unpack these conversations and hopefully get people thinking a little differently about the world.
Exactly.
So thanks for joining us on another deep dive.